Good morning. Hi, Nico. Hi, Arunima.
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Good, good.
Hello,
So, Aruna,
Bobby.
I don't know if you've been introduced to Nico, but Arunima is the mentee for the documentation task force, and Nico is the pioneer behind Firefly becoming a graduated project. By the way, congratulations. That was wonderful. That was a good TOC meeting.
Thanks. Yeah, that was exciting. Two projects in one meeting.
Yeah, and I tried to get screenshots to show because again, we're trying to figure out how to document stuff to show the difference in that's something I didn't write a question down for. Show the difference in the approaches. What did you think about the two different approaches? Which one did you think was more
Well, I'd probably be biased toward the approach that I took.
yeah.
um, but um, yeah, I think and I talked with Tracy a little bit beforehand, just in terms of kind of what would I wanted to make good use of people's time and sort of trying to find the balance between like there were some new TOC members who weren't there when Firefly became a project and some TOC members that just hadn't kept up with the project. And so like I needed to catch everybody up to speed, but I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time rehashing
Mhm.
a bunch of stuff that people already knew. So I was just really trying to strike that balance in the material that we went through.
Yeah, no. I thought the presentation was great. I think, though, again, which is why the whole task force is here, that you should have had an easier checkpoint checklist. Like, okay, we're moving to graduated. Open this checklist and say, oh, do I have these things? And then, and then just present the checklist to the TOC. And you can, dive deeper in then. But I think there needs to be some guidance.
Yeah, which is that overall, that's the approach that I took. The So I basically started with it. There is a document which
Yeah,
is
that.
the incubation exit criteria, and I just took
Yep.
that document and I went line by line and wrote out in the proposal that we briefly scrolled through how Firefly meets the criteria or how we think it does. Um, I guess the one really challenging part is there are a few requirements in there that are somewhat subjective, and
Mhm.
that's like there's not a necessarily um it's not something you can empirically measure and say yes.
You're like, oh,
This
you must have a robust community. Well, thank you.
right, yeah, and it's like okay to it's not just a discrete yes or no. It's there's some sort of spectrum that we're on here.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, also, Kajal joined us too. She's also an integral part of this task force. So I know that everybody's busy. So I hope everybody can see the screen I have up with the questions. Yes, no?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to go through the questions and I'm just going to take really quick notes as to some of your answers to the topics that we're kind of trying to see. Now, I think the task force, to be perfectly honest, we're kind of like at a crossroads now. We have a job of presenting our recommendations, but it's hard to present recommendations without actually following through and doing them, especially with these AI tools. But that's so labor intense and it's not really what we're here for, but it's hard to show it if you don't go through it. So we're like at a banging our heads at this point. So this would be very helpful. So congratulations. Let's start again. So congratulations very much on the first antitrust policy and code of conduct on the screen. Everybody just take note of that. Everybody's been in these meetings before and pretty familiar with that. Um, yeah, so congratulations. I One of my biggest thrills in Hyperledger on the TOC. I'm not sure if I'm going to be up again or if I'm going to run again for the TOC at this point. But watching you guys from incubation for my I think 3-year tenure from incubation to graduation was probably the best um, looking back thing that happened for me because it was a whole 100% perspective on the whole project cycle. So that for me was great. So what are your thoughts on the project lab to graduated journey for you? Like what was your best, worst? I think you're on
Yeah.
mute.
Oh, Sorry, I wasn't sure if there was more to the question. Sorry. Um, no, I think I I mean to be totally transparent, we had a rough start, and I think I will say there have been a lot of improvements since then, and it is sort of as like you know you look at any place that has rules, and sometimes you look at a list of rules, and you're like, what, why is that a rule? That's weird. And it's usually because somebody at some point that rule was a problem, and so they had to write the rule down so that it wasn't a problem. I feel like in some cases our project was sort of that uh, like there weren't clearly defined not that we were breaking the rules to clarify, but like some of the hard criteria for what is a lab, what is an incubating project, and what does it take to move to a graduating project wasn't written down clearly when we first presented Firefly and proposed that it become a project. And we, what, from our standpoint, the software itself and the idea behind it was mature enough to be a project of some sort, a probably an incubating project. It didn't have the community around it. It didn't have a diversity of maintainership. So there were definitely some things that were missing from the kind of the maturity that it's at now. But I think there was some debate amongst the TOC about where the project should land when it first came to Hyperledger, because it was a working project. It wasn't like some things that start out in labs are like, we're going to try something and we don't know whether it will work or not, and they're really experimental, and those are cool, and I think there needs to be a place for those. Anyway, so I'm sorry for the ramble here, but I'll just say, like, there was a lot of drama in some of those first TOC meetings that is that definitely left a bit of a like it wasn't a super great impression, just in some of the political shenanigans that went on. In people, like, we came to a TOC meeting and we're asking to vote to make Firefly an incubating project, and then somebody raised a motion to not vote to do it, and it was just like it was just super confusing, and there was a lot of drama. But I'll say I think a lot has changed in all of those regards in the last 2 years. So I'm really happy to see that change. There was no drama in the last TOC meeting, which I was pleased with. I was not sure what to expect after last time, but I think the requirements are more clear. I still think there's a few areas where they could be like we were talking about earlier, maybe a little less subjective, a little easier to measure, and a little easier for everyone to just agree objectively whether something meets or does not meet the criteria.
Yeah, I agree. From the beginning, I think when we had just the large blockchain or DLT projects coming into the TOC, they happened more organically. And then, like, the foundation 3 years ago kind of got a little bit more regimented and decided to do things more with guidelines. And I think Firefly was the first project that hit when we were saying, yes, we need guidelines. Here's what we have right now. Does it work? And the answer was definitively no. We need more guidelines. We need to help these people, because that first meeting was nobody, like, everybody kind of knew what you were asking, and everybody kind of knew what the TOC needed, but the communication on how to make that. I mean, we weren't really asking for anything, like you said, you didn't know you needed. It just was the way we were asking for it was just not clear. And again, I couldn't be happier that you worked through it and stuck with it, because it's a great project. And again, so I think the other DLTs happened more organically, and as Firefly and Cactus started coming in, they weren't just 100% DLTs or blockchains. They were different. And I think that difference was something that, we needed as a TOC to adjust our rules to accommodate. And hopefully we did that, but let's move on. So that's good. That's nice to know. And I'm glad things you think are clear. And that's what we're trying to do in the task force, is make things even easier. By not only doing user guides for the community, but user guides for the maintainers as well. I mean, that's, the community really can't use the product if they can't understand it. So, okay. So from a documentation perspective, let me just do this. No, I didn't want to do that. I'll deal with that later. So from a documentation perspective, were there clear guidelines? So there's 2 points to this, I guess. Clear guidelines for what you needed for the community for documentation, not moving through the life cycle yet. That's the next question. But like, so I have this project in lab. Oh, I need to supply documentation for the maintainers. I need to supply documentation for potential coders and documentation for potential users. Oh, here's templates. Like, was that easy for you, or was that a difficult process?
I in terms of supplying documentation for the community, I'd say it was easy. I don't think we really leaned on any particular list of things that we needed. I think we sort of took the approach of like, all of us maintainers have used open source software, and we know what good documentation looks like. It looks like a project that I can just go look at GitHub and figure out exactly what I need. And so, that was sort of the approach that we took, is just, we need to make this project as approachable as possible and make it easy for people to get started on their own. And, my goal from the beginning was, and this is a lot of the thinking around the Firefly CLI and how it works, is like, I want to be able to, I want anyone who's familiar with software development to be able to run Firefly and all of its dependencies and have a fully working technology stack with running like a maximum of 3 commands. And so that was sort of the goal of that tool. And then there are lots of guides in the docs on how to use the tool in various configurations to customize that. If you want to run it with Fabric, or if you want to run it with Besu, or just all the different combinations of things you can do there.
Just to follow up before we move on to the next one, but from a Hyperledger Foundation community, like when you were in incubation or moving to graduated, was there any guidelines for you to say, okay, so now I need this for maintainers and for code contributors, but user guides for the external community, maybe I need a YouTube or a how to, get started using this. Were there any guidelines for that, or do you think there needed to be guidelines for that? And in your opinion, what would they look like?
Yeah, good question. I'm not aware of any guidelines for that. I don't feel like we necessarily needed any, and we've just always sort of done what we felt was best for the community. Having all of that documentation there as early as we could get to it in the project was a priority for us. Having pages that describe, if someone wants to get involved, what are the, like, there are some, like, for instance, doing sign off on your commits. Hyperledger and the Linux Foundation require that. And so we have a page that documents that, like, you need to do this if you're going to commit. And just, yeah, I guess we just always sort of followed the principle of like, what's the best thing for the community and to help the community grow. Haven't necessarily felt a need for like a a list of like, hey, you should document these sorts of things or have these sorts of pages. We just always sort of taken the approach of like, if people are, I guess another rule of thumb for us is like, if people are coming to our Discord channel and asking the same question repeatedly, we probably need a docs page for it. And so we'll write a docs page for it and then start pointing people to that. And then hopefully the number of times we get that question decreases. It doesn't always help. Sometimes people still ask the question and I'm like, hey, you should read this page. And they're like, great, thanks.
Well, we have a question at the end about AI, and remind me about that because I want to ask you in context of AI for that. But
I have
we'll get
opinions
to
on
that in
AI.
a second. What?
I have opinions on AI.
Oh, good. I can't wait to get there. Okay, so that's interesting. So you just think your documentation is better just evolving organically as it needs.
I mean, we think it's better. I'm not sure I would say that. I'm not sure what we're comparing it to. Better than what? But I think
having like check. You need a user guide that hits this. You need a committer's guide that shows them how to sign off on the commits. You need, for someone like me, like with the giving chain, I just needed a blockchain, and I saw how easy from your wiki page it looked to get started. So that's what attracted me. So I'm an end user, and your guy, you did a great job on attracting me over. So
yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So the next one is the best practices badging perspective, and that's more as a maintainer. Did you know exactly what needed to be in each one of moving through those life cycles? Like you said, was it very clear what needed to be in your GitHub repository for incubation, moving into graduate or lab incubation, graduated? Were those 3 steps clearly spelled out for you so you knew, or again, was it just something you were doing because what you felt you needed?
Yeah, I think they were not necessarily clear at the very beginning. By the time we made it to an incubating project, moving to a graduated project was pretty clear at that point what it was that we needed. And it was not something that we needed in our GitHub repo. It was that we needed more diverse maintainers. So I think throughout the process, those things became clear.
Okay. Would it have bothered you if there was just like a checklist, like a Google Doc that you, before you started, like 8 points that you had to have or 8 things you needed to do, and then you could just go make sure you had that? Would that have been helpful?
Yeah, that would have been great.
I'm leading the witness if I was in court right now.
Yep. I think one other so the, like, in terms of what would have been helpful, one thing that was, I guess, just a couple pieces of feedback on things that I would have found helpful as we moved from incubation to graduation. So we touched on briefly, like, some of the requirements are a little bit subjective. It would be nice if, I think there's maybe some wording changes that I think the requirements say committers when they should say maintainers, but that's there's a big difference in those things. We don't need to get into all that right now. There was some confusion about like how to actually get the TOC to discuss it. Like, how do I put it on the agenda? How do I make the proposal? And so, like, I found out by just talking to people, and fortunately, like, David Boswell and Hart Montgomery said, like, hey, it's a PR to the Hyperledger HIP repo. And I was like, okay, great. But I think there was confusion amongst the TOC about that too. Some people were saying, oh, you just
I
open
didn't
a
even
GitHub.
know that.
Yeah.
I thought you just bugged Tracy and said, get me on the agenda.
Yeah. So to get it on so from what I understand now, to get it on the agenda is you open an issue to the TOC GitHub repo, and to make a proposal, it's a PR to the Hyperledger HIP repo. And so what I did is I created the issues that, hey, please put this on the agenda, and I'm going to link to my proposal that I would like you to vote on. And then just in terms of like, okay, what does the TOC expect to see in the meeting? I just sat down and talked about it with Tracy, but having I don't know, having some sort of like, hey, here's how the process works. Open a PR here. This is what the TOC is going to expect to see presented to them, that sort of thing. And you kind of saw on the call, like Rama and I both took pretty different approaches to like how we presented the material. And I think that was because we were both just trying to figure it out as we went. I think both worked, but if the TOC wants it to be more of a kind of a consistent approach, maybe documenting the process of it a little bit beyond just like the hard requirements, but just like here's what you need to do, but here's how you need to go about doing it too.
So again, this is something that I had always thought. You and I have talked about what we've done, and we're going to get into that in just a few seconds about your GitHub repository and making that into user guides. But what do you think separate from maintainers? Because again, I think there's three different distinct personas in the community that all need to be reached differently from when they onboard. And one of them is contributors and the other is end users. So do you think that the maintainers documentation is sufficient for committers? Do you think that again, how would you see attacking those three users, they're contributors and end users? What do you think they require? I know end users don't need GitHub repositories because they don't know how to use them. So what would you think if you could click off like one or two things that these people require to make them more efficient in the community? What would it be?
Yeah, so we have, I would say that the majority of the docs is either applicable to all user personas or targeted. Like if you just come to the docs page, there's big bright flashing signs is like getting started, click here. And those are sort of the I'm new. I just want to try the thing out. I don't know where to go. Oh, okay, there's a big getting started button. Oh, let me just click this and see where this goes. And that walks them through how to be a user. And that's sort of where they start their journey. And then there are lots of tutorials that then go from there, like as a user or as somebody building an app with Firefly, how to explore all the different features of it. We have a separate section that is for contributors, and that's a little bit like it's in the left nav. It's not hard to find, but you do have to go look for it if you are interested in contributing. It's not hard to find, but it's not necessarily something that we throw at everybody that comes to the docs page because not everybody's probably looking for that. And that's where we talk about like what you need to have on your computer to compile it, how to make sure you commit with sign off, just like making sure that you follow the standard GitHub pull request flow, that sort of thing. A subsection in there is for maintainers because we sort of view the maintainers are a subset of contributors that also have they have been voted to be a representative of the project. They have write access to some or all of the repos themselves, and they have the ability to make changes, do releases, and that sort of thing. So there's a subsection in the contributors docs for maintainers to document like here's how you do a release on a repo. Go here, click this, fill out this information, do this sort of thing, run these tests, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. That's interesting. Okay, so okay, now here's the big the big question. Gianluca couldn't be here today, unfortunately, but he is working with me and working with us on this part of the tech guides. So again, I'm going to just scroll down here just real quickly to give you a preface of what our task force is up against. Where'd it go? I know it's here. Okay, so here we go. This is a list of all of the projects in the community and all of the different types of documentation that they're using, how they're building it. And as you see, it's all different. And it's all confusing, and it's all, I guess this is still this is when we did this last year. I'm not sure if the new versions were still done with just the docs with Jekyll, but however,
Yep, I
that
still use that.
yeah, okay. So yeah, I thought you did that. I thought we had the conversation the other day about that. Sorry for making everyone dizzy. So with that said, as a task force, we're trying to, again, not tell you how to do your documentation, but give you suggestions and guidelines as to what that would look like from a maintainer's perspective. So where did I go? Oh, that's not where I am. So how would you think the way you did it like completely on your own? If you had guidelines from the community, I'm going to kind of ask, what would they look like for you to want to use them, as opposed to for you to say, that's too tough, I don't want to do that? And did you know that we supply a free tooling for Make the Docs?
Yes, I think I am aware of that now. I think when we started out on this journey, that was not available, if I'm recalling that correctly. So now it's weighing the cost of like switching to something else. I guess back when we started the journey of building a doc site, Read the Docs was available, but we were steered away from it. As basically we were told, like, you can use that if you need to, it's not free. So we would prefer things that are free. That was sort of the guidance from Hyperledger. So we set out on a task to find something that was open source, was free, and flexible enough that we could customize it to do whatever we need to do. So we landed with just hosting it with GitHub Pages and using a Jekyll theme that we could customize. It does have some pretty nice features. Some of them are fairly sophisticated. It is fully and actually a lot of this we built ourselves too. So it's fully localizable, internationalizable, if that's probably not a word. I'm not even good at English, so, but you can have it in different languages. So that we haven't had docs contributed in other languages, but we've done a proof of concept in having a couple of pages or replacing strings and that sort of thing in other languages. So that's cool. It's also versioned as well. So every time we release a new version of Firefly, there is a new version of the doc site that's published, and all of the previous versions are archived, and you can select them from a dropdown. Now, that being said, it does have some, like, we built all that ourselves, and we are not professional documentation site builders. We tend to basically spend the amount of time necessary on the docs to make them excellent, but not perfect, and then focus more of our efforts on building as perfect as possible blockchain software.
What would have helped you in that journey from like the community? Like if like you said, you didn't know that Make the Docs was a paid tooling. If before you started, like we have the mentees going through and creating these new GitHub repositories, and one of our jobs is to look at that and say, if we could give them before you start making your documentation, think of using this. And
Yeah, I mean,
follow-up question to that is, were your graphics from the community easy for you to find, or did you have to search for them? Or, like, was the Firefly logo right there for you, or that kind of style guidance
we
as
made
well?
all that stuff from scratch. So I guess, yeah, it was there.
You made your own
um,
logo?
yeah, I,
Nice.
I I didn't make it, but a former colleague of mine did.
Oh, that's interesting. And the name, you guys came up with the name, or did Hyperledger give you the name? I think you guys came up with it.
We brought the name, we brought the logo. Yeah.
Good, 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 good. But that's not always the case, right? Sometimes I think, in my opinion, sometimes people, like when Cactus, I think they told Cactus what to call it. Like, so again, I don't think there's clear guidelines on that either. Once you created the logo, was there any way, or like, how did you get it up to David to say, this is our logo, use this? Like, was that easy or confusing for you, or?
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. I think once we became a um so I don't think they did anything. I don't think Hyperledger did anything with it while we were a lab. But as soon as we became an incubating project, they said, "Hey, send us the SVG for your logo." And then they slapped the word Hyperledger above it and said, "How's this look?" And we said, make sure it's lined up, but otherwise looks great. Um, and so that was about it. I mean, it was just a few emails back and forth. It's pretty straightforward.
And again, the beginning part, what would you have needed from the Hyperledger community insofar as knowing about Make the Docs to use? Like, if we came up with, oh, we're going to use Git books, oh, we're going to use Make the Docs, oh, would that have been helpful for you? What would you have liked that to look like?
Yeah, I guess. So when did Make the Docs become available and kind of become the recommended standard?
I would say about when we started the task force a year ago, David and Tracy said, and I'm going to
Okay.
share this real quick. There's a page that's called Work in Progress, which was news to me.
Yeah. So a
And
year at that point, our doc site had already been going for a year and a half strong, and
yeah,
so I guess just
before I
like
became aware of it, again that's one of the things that the problem in the community is that people aren't aware of what to do. It's more of a problem to figure out what the TOC is looking for than actually to do what the TOC is looking for.
so
Um,
I guess would have been helpful to have Make the Docs available.
okay.
Would have been helpful. We like it just wasn't there when we needed it, which is fine. We've been okay without it, but and then I guess like because I do remember having a conversation with Rye Jones about like, hey, what should we use for docs? And there was maybe a gentle steer away from read the docs because of cost,
Mm.
but that was about it. It was kind of like, hey, do whatever is, again, it was whatever's best for the community. But there was a little bit of a steer away from read the docs. That was about all we got. If Make the Docs had been available at the time, it would have been great to have that conversation at that point before we built our site. I'd say that's about it, really.
Mm. And then here's like some fun questions. What do you think? So for best practices and project documentation, do you think gamifying it or making it badgeable would have been helpful for you? So in other words, this even goes to your security and your licensing, and like, if you had kind of information as to what those were needed and you could see how far along, would that have been helpful for you, or is that just something that happens as you go? Like a badge, like, okay, so now we got our license, so we have a licensing badge, we have our documentation for our 3 personas, and it's clearly specified on our wiki page, so we get a badge for that. Like, would that kind of system have worked for you or turned you away?
Um, I I I I personally don't know that I would have been like motivated by that, or I think the like I honestly I think just having the requirements written out on a page is enough. I there could be some cool ideas around incentivizing community members to contribute back to the docs with sort of like tokenized awards for sorry, maybe jumping down in your list, but I think it's related, sort of maybe not the project earning a badge, but like, can I as a contributor earn a badge for a certain number of contributions, and can that be something that can I can display as an individual contributor.
So for you, like as a project maintainer, when you were in incubation, heading towards graduation, if you had, I'm going to jump ahead to the dashboard idea, a dashboard that had a checklist on it for everything that you needed to do to get out of incubation to graduated, and you would earn badges for that. That would be something you would consider additional work and not necessary, or something, oh, this is great, now I know I got my security badge, I don't have to worry about it, kind of.
Yeah,
Like, we don't
I
want to
think
give the maintainers more work, we're trying to make it easier for them, so we're throwing out different ideas.
yeah. I don't think it would have it wouldn't have made any more work for me. I think it would obviously be work to build it by whoever builds it. I don't know that as I think about that sort of idea, like, it sounds cool. I just don't know that the cost to build it in terms of time is worth the benefit to the people that would be using it. Yeah, for me personally, to like just having the requirements written on a page is more than enough for me. I can go through there, and part of it is like I am the community lead. So like I know the state of the community. So I could just go down the list and go, yep, check, 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 check. No, okay, yeah, we need to work on this one. Not everybody necessarily in the community would be able to know that. So if it's something that's like, hey, we want to publish the status and sort of like promote where we're at in this process, it might be a really useful tool for that, for somebody who's not as like hands-on, and like their job is to help the project continue to mature. So I mean, I think about like my leadership here at Kaleido. Something like that might have been useful to them, as just a page they could pull up and go, oh yeah, well here's where we're at in the process, rather than coming and asking me like, hey Nico, do we meet the criteria? What hurdles do we still have to overcome? So I don't think it's necessarily useful to excuse me, sorry, to the maintainers that are like checking the boxes and doing the things themselves, but it might be useful to other people who are curious about those things.
Got it. So real quick, you hinted at this before. What is your take on AI from the Firefly team?
So I've had a couple of ideas of where some places where I think it could be useful. And I've had even more skepticism from the other maintainers. And so we haven't implemented anything yet, but an idea where I thought it might be useful is a chat bot that we'd probably like stick it in its own channel so that it didn't just like go crazy in other channels. But you could ask it questions, and basically it would with the input would be the doc site. So it would have a knowledge of like all of the different pages of things. And if somebody asks it a question about like, well, how can I send a GIF of a dancing cat to another Firefly member? It would go, oh, here's a page in the docs that talks about how you can send data blobs from one Firefly organization to another. And so basically just like trying to guide people to the existing resources that are there. That's a potential way that it could be used. I would caution that with my real world experience with AI. Some colleagues of mine recently used ChatGPT to generate sort of extra descriptions of each of the pages in the doc site to enhance search engine optimization. And the results were frankly really bad. And the problem is that ChatGPT in its current state, which is probably one of the best models out there right now, it knows what realm Firefly is in, that it's blockchain software, but it doesn't really understand what it is, and it makes errors in how it talks about Firefly, and so I'm excuse me, sorry. There's a big PR that's up right now to change some stuff in the docs, and I started reviewing it the other day, and it was basically like every other description. I'm like, no, this isn't right. No, Firefly doesn't do that. No, reword this way. And so I finally just went down the hall and I talked to the guys that did it, and I'm like, hey, we should talk about like the. Can we just like one? We had descriptions that were written by like humans who wrote the software, and those descriptions are pretty stinking accurate because they're written by the people that wrote the code. Can we just use those? But it was, yeah. Our experience was that my worry reading through all the stuff that it generated is that it will end up misleading people because so I'll give you a specific example. One of the common misconceptions when somebody just like sees a picture of Firefly or reads a one-liner sentence of it, like, oh, cool, Firefly sounds like a blockchain. Firefly is not a blockchain. Firefly uses a blockchain, and it is a platform to build applications on top of. ChatGPT often makes the same mistake in the way that it describes Firefly. It talks about Firefly as if it is a blockchain, and so it will use
it doesn't know where it positions in the tech stack correctly.
Exactly. So it will talk. For instance, one of the phrases it generated is that it said something about Firefly doing distributed consensus, which is not patently false if you think of, well, Firefly is this whole big thing that also includes a blockchain. Okay, I guess that's true. But as an engineer, I would describe like Firefly core does it. So it also depends on the context in which you're talking about it. Like Firefly core does not do distributed consensus. That role is that is the blockchain's job in life. And Firefly uses the blockchain to be able to do that. So it's sort of these like I'm worried that it will perpetuate common misconceptions because it doesn't
now,
quite.
do you think, because as a task force, we've been really looking into getting and we were talking with the head of the Linux Foundation, Robert Reeves, about this. And we were discussing getting an AI engine for frequently asked questions for the Hyperledger community, because I know that ChatGPT was programmed like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and the information is only good up to there, which is useless in blockchain because 2 years is two years too late. That would be fed only from our GitHub repositories and read the docs and from our information. Do you think that would fix that problem, or do you still think that its thought process and language learning is off?
Yeah, frankly, I don't know. My personal experience with it has been when it tries to generate its own content, I can tell pretty quickly when something's been AI generated because it's just not quite right. And part of that is like I know Firefly, and so I can immediately tell when something about Firefly has been written by AI or when it's been written by somebody who actually works on Firefly. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, same thing with user guides. You can tell when they're flat.
Yeah.
One-dimensional documentation, I call it. Anyway, that's interesting. And again, I don't think anybody has the answer whether or not feeding it the correct information will make it learn properly, but that's something that we have to. So I just wanted to show you this real quick, if I have it. So one of our recommendations for the task force, let me see if I can get that over there pretty much easy, is something that looks like this, which this was just a mock-up. So depending on who you are coming into the community, if you're a project maintainer, you would put your project name in there. So if you're maintaining more than one project, you could actually check on more than one project. So you'd put in Firefly, and then it would, see if we can get that clear. It would give you that kind of badging, or I look at it like a pizza getting filled up. When your security's done properly, that slice is full. Yeah, this isn't going to work on my computer. I'm asking far too much of my computer right now. I said no. So an idea like this, where then the contributors would come in, and then their GitHub repository or their dashboards would look different depending on what they needed to do. And I call it community contributors. Those are people in the special interest groups and the working groups, as opposed to community curious. I work for a company that might want to spin up a blockchain, and I heard Firefly was the easiest. Where do I get information on that? So would this be helpful, or do you think this is too, like you said before, labor intense for the benefit?
I guess I'm not sure, like, where would this be, and who would, like, how would I
Well,
get to
I'm
this?
envisioning when you log into the Linux Foundation, it wants to know who you are. So as soon as you log in, you get your
So
customized dashboard, which has, a button to the main page of the wiki. You can customize your dashboard to have wherever you go most often. But it would, if you identify yourself as a maintainer, you would have access to the user guides and the information you needed to maintain a project, as opposed to someone who comes in and identifies themselves as community curious for Firefly.
so I rarely log in with my Linux Foundation ID. The only time I log in is when I need to go edit a page, which is usually whenever we have a community call. I log in so that I have write access to go create the new page and put it there. Other than that, I don't ever log into the Linux Foundation. So I don't. I actually don't think in my normal workflow I would ever run into this. I think like the wiki is helpful when I need to go find something that's related to just sort of like the Hyperledger Foundation in general, and not a particular
Like the
project.
incubation status requirements, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
or like if I need like a template for, which is a thing that I look for often, but I can never find, is like a slides template for like what's the branding for, what's the new slide template for the new Hyperledger branding. Like that's the type of thing I go to the wiki for. Or like how do I need the email address of a TOC member or something like that. If I'm wanting to find information on a project, like I'm going to go to GitHub, or I'm going to go to like that project's docs site, wherever it's at. Those or Discord, and ask somebody if I need to talk to a person. I think that's really the kind of the center of gravity for the community, and where the actual activity happens. Activity happens in GitHub or Discord, and information is really learned from the doc site.
Wow,
At least for
that's
Firefly.
interesting. Oh no, that's probably for all of the projects too. Good to know. Briefly talking on tokenizing this, that would just be more work after I've talked to you about this. Maybe not for end users to get up to, as a kind of edX course or a Coursera course. Oh, I'm earning badges in the Hyperledger Foundation. I can get one that says I'm this or I'm that for my LinkedIn profile. Above and beyond that, do you think that the maintainers or the community contributors to the code would benefit from a tokenized learning environment or contributing environment?
I certainly think it would be cool. I think in a community that is very blockchain centric, like having more open community blockchain uses would definitely just be something that's like just a cool showcase of the technology of like and it could be built on Firefly and like a public Besu chain, or I don't know if a public Besu chain is even a thing you can do securely, but I'm thinking out loud here. And maybe
Sounds like a job for next year's mentorship program, doesn't it?
maybe they get really cool with it. Maybe a cacti integration that will let you bridge assets onto a different public chain, maybe mainnet or something. But like some sort of thing that I like actually like, hey, here's a service that, as you obviously it would be open source, but as you commit code to Hyperledger projects, keeps track of your contributions and is going to give you credit for those on a chain that you can go look at and see. And that would it be useful? I don't think it would be like, it wouldn't be useful in the sense that like it solves a problem that people had and they can do a thing that they now couldn't do before. Would it be useful in the sense of like being a really cool showcase for Hyperledger's projects and just the technology in general, and to maybe provide a little bit of an incentive or like just an exciting thing that you get for participating in the community that you could show off to other people. It could be useful in those regards.
Right, I'm glad. And is final question, anything that as a documentation task force before we make our recommendations to the TOC you think we should know?
Oh boy. No, I think we've covered a lot of topics. Yeah, we would certainly, I guess, just maybe not related to this question, but like if other Hyperledger projects are centering around make the docs, and if the features that we need are there, and it's not a huge effort to take. I mean, most of our docs are written in Markdown, so I think it should be fairly portable in terms of like the content of the docs. We would definitely look at unifying our doc site and aligning it with the rest of them. Especially if I didn't get into the some of the specific problems that we have with ours, but the versioning, like it does versioning, but it's very hacky. Most of the logic for how it versions the docs is actually all in GitHub Actions. So like if there's a better way to do that, I would be very interested in that. There's some specific cases that our versioning code in the GitHub Actions does not account for, which causes problems. Namely, if you do a patch release of a feature version, so like you have, if 1.2 is the latest feature version, but then you go back and like you do a security hotfix on 1.1.5 or whatever and release that, because then 1.1.5 is actually newer than 1.2. It's a mess. I won't get into all the gory, but basically the code just doesn't really account for that case, and so it throws things off.
I could see that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nico. And I can't believe we took up the whole hour. I've learned so much that will help us with our recommendations. Again, we can come up with the greatest recommendations, but if we don't run them by the maintainers, they don't make any sense.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bobby. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.